I'm yet to debate between myself, my mother and sister about who had it worse, who had what worse in '89. But for me, it was like a wind-up of wonderment that had the most horrid justification at the end of it. So, you've been pulled out for one term from kindergarten. You're staying in Sydney, going between your grandparents and your cousins. They're going to school, meanwhile, so your cousins are going to their schools. And coming home, and you're not, and your uncle and your auntie, and nor your grandfather nor your grandmother are telling you anything at all whatsoever about how or why you're there. Nor your mother. So no one has told you anything. And so they say it is age 5 is when the brain is attuning itself to learning, and you're learning Jack. And then at the end you're told that, well, your mother was stabbed by her father. And then, what's more, being Christian, they go on to think that the rudimentary way to discipline you, setting the table and preparing to butter some bread, I was accosted as if I was to bear hostility. And I was like, huh? This is what I hate, is that when at least those who read about genetics learn things like you have to be in proximity, and there's genetic recession and expression. Whereas what religious people do is go, oh, it's in the blood. It's in the blood. I'm like, well, why aren't you doing things like taking infants that you don't think are the next fucking, are the sequel to Prince Charles, and throwing them into fucking large rocks and smashing their heads open? Because it's only by this justification by the blood that they even have any merit to ever speak to a kid in that way at all, without instantly being like incestuously sick in the head. So I don't respect them, and they know I don't respect them. But it's because of what I see. I mean, if you're going to say, and they're unilateralists, like they'll be, well, you can't have it both ways about so many things. I'm like, well, you can't have it both ways. How are you the survivors of an escape from the Great Depression's effects? If so, then why did you pick Christianity to boost yourself back up? Oh, you want to kill bisexuals? Okay. Well, then don't tell me off for the attempted murder of a piece of fucking toast. Because in any case, oh, you can change filter somewhat. Yeah, so arguments about like maternal and paternal, well, in complete paternal deprivation for the duration that you're there. Sort of calling into question. I grew up considering myself luckier, but with time, over time you apply. Because the thing is, like, the art that I'm into, I get, but like my mother and sister won't get. That ideas like, fuck, Luke really needs his privacy to think things through on his own. Said that eavesdrop in my room, and then if you take a Christian interpretation in an approach of the art that I listen to, we are completely opposed to every moment of the man Jesus of Nazareth's mistreatment from the bribe for his abduction to the crucifixion to the lie about his bearing out this title as a saviour. Because you see, as a conquered people, there'd be no way for him to comprehend how to address properly. And they would have known things like, don't you disrespectfully respond to a question from your conquerors, who is this kingdom allied with the Roman Empire. And so Jesus getting approached and asked, there's plenty of indicators that him stealing a horse is it shows some, and once again, I'm not saying he was therefore in favour of opposing thou shalt not kill because he stole a horse. I'm saying he was not a cocksucker of the Mosaic Code of the Ten Commandments. If you want to have any dignity, self-respect, if you're conquered, one is you don't take on every single belief and value of your conqueror. So, yeah, I think he was a bilateral thinker who was looking out for his fellow conquered Jews. And so what you see reflected in that, are you the king of the Jews question, is that if the person was dispatched from a kingdom and instructed to ask specifically to issue that charge, then the castle would have to be so inbred that I can't tell you how inbred that it would be. They had conquered these people and knew they had no independent monarchy of their own. There was no Dutch. They didn't first sniff out for a duke and a duchess of the Jews or anything like that. They just go straight to Jesus, who's talking about the Son of Man story, which is perhaps arguably a poetic counter to Genesis, to try and restore a sense of individuality. Because you see him telling the story as if away from himself all the time, which means he's trying to invite the listener to questionably derive meaningfulness from it. And that's not dogmatic so much as you read in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So there are indicators that he was not. And then what you see them doing is justifying that initial question. Like, why was it right to accuse him of being the king of the Jews? Well, let's just say he was God from the very beginning, and that he's restored perfection to our incest story, and abolished that slapper who ate the apple. No one has to smell the queefs anymore. Everyone will be cheering. It will be celebrations everywhere. Once again, trust the kingdom and his murderers to come up with an idea like that, but they did, and that's what you see happen in the Gospel of John. But so it's a long, lengthy conversation about bits and pieces. Like he who was without sin cast the first stone story could have been one that was too controversial to have written in Mark initially because of threats. These scribes could have been getting told that things like, we're giving you the luxury of being trained scribes to write papyrus manuscripts owned by the treasury at the kingdom. You will not offend the king or queen in any way. So if they were weighing that up against an unjust suicide, murder-suicide, which is the feeling that's induced if you're trapped by words and then physical force to that impact, you go through those motions, and all his response is, "Well, you said it," which he had no way to say. Reality, that he would have known, that they would have known, that he would have known, that he was wise enough to say, well, that's a ridiculous question. So, well, you said it was probably amongst his only options for any hope for an out. But yeah, biphobia could have been why the accuser thought of it. And if not told by the kingdom, immediately accused Jesus of Nazareth of the question, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Because the question's an embarrassing one on the kingdom's behalf. It makes them sound stupid. It's like, chaining up a bunch of indigenous slaves together and then accusing all of them of conspiracy to lock themselves up or something. And then, well, that more or less went on with, like, ships, British ships with Negro slaves on the ships, and they'd chain them up together. And then if one of them caught a cold or a flu, then they'd all catch the flu. So then they would kick them off the side of the ship into the water, let them drown together chained, and claim them back through insurance as lost cargo. And so I think that throughout centuries, the respectability that isn't deserved towards the Gospels has fostered opportunity for repetitions of this sort of misbehavior. And if it wasn't hated more openly centuries and centuries back, we would have abolished slavery everywhere centuries and centuries back. And that's one reason why I'll deface Bible covers, snort drugs off defaced Bible covers, and burn Bibles and rip Bibles and shit on substandard prescriptions boxes. Shit on boxes. I shit on boxes if they expired too long earlier. What? I hate privacy violation, and it's a health requirement for me to know that I can trace how I'm greeted, to distinguish between a meet and greet and an unfair verbal accostation is precisely the measure of me going, how would you have known that unless you watch this in violation of privacy here. Otherwise, if it's just the last conversation you had with them on yours and their terms at wherever it was, then it's just there's no contrivance. And my family are into that contrivance, and the way that they'll judge, or I am to know from some partial verbal disclosure, it's been enough for them to say Luke doesn't deserve to see the ashes of his grandfather, nor to even say farewell to his biological father either. So that's just, I see that as been very inbred, because if they're going to say I'm as bad as they think my blood father is, then wouldn't they say, well, Luke, let Luke go witness the body and say goodbye. He deserves that much. But then instead they ripped both off. All because they thought what my perspective of this film was without fucking asking me. I'm like, shit, where did you inbred cocksuckers get into the fucking Father Roy habit of fucking not asking fucking questions? I'll give you their addresses, just the ones from my generation. The Great Depression has rolled on again because they asked for it back, but my generation is possibly wiser across the board. So otherwise, I'll give you the addresses of all the other rellos, and knowns can be free to throw poop, anything from eggs, rotten eggs, to feces of various animals at their homes and gardens. It is really disgusting because, A, they'll go, we believe we're inbred from a garden, and imply that directly to you. B, they'll tell you that they pray for you when you're uncomfortable by that. C, they'll tell you to pray to and adore a murderer of a man who's just loved people. And then they'll constantly watch every step you take and go, well, Is he loving, or is Luke gonna try and kill someone? And you think, what the fuck? Like, I see how you earn these dog shit faces that you got. Like, fucking hell. Have some fucking integrity. That they think that the voiceover is morally prescriptive. So it led to a bunch of people talking about me in relation to this film, which led to a bunch of surveillance people coming back to me, ready to like go me. For like, I hadn't even exercised the right to movement unarmed, much less said a word. I just would watch and think. So you know, it's not designed. Basically, if you're not open to the prospect that when we know bilateralism in brains is and has always been a natural occurrence. Weddings were invented by your precious fucking church. It's always perfect. And it said the earth was at the center of the universe, so Galileo's whole family has to go down and he has to be a heretic. And then they let him off charges in the mid-1990s, early to mid-1990s. So that's great, because by then what was left of his bones proudly accepted the church's redaction of this charge against him. Went, oh yeah, okay, planets are orbiting. You know, we've got a global satellite network up there now, but we had to be sure. You know, fuck them. Fucking fuck them. They're the ones who have the story that they love, the Ten Commandments, which is immediately followed by the Ten Commandments being smashed by Moses, and Moses ordering his slaves to mass suicide. So fuck them, the hypocrite. So what's said has been said, and what's documented has been documented, and my counters will be my counters. But I think how fucking pathetic. Well, the only thing that they've truly proven to me is that yeah, this there is no telling the difference between being a Christian and saying I want to partake in suffering to death a bilateral brain, collapsing and destroying and eroding a bilateral brain, destroying a bilateral brain. And then they'll do it while saying, oh, but blame it on the drugs that go into his mouth. And then they'll go to church and put a wafer in their mouth. And there's no... and they'll go... and they'll scoff at the willingness to open a dialogue about what the measure of hypocrisy ever could be in their case. Despite their Hebrews saying, oh, what a hypocrite I am, and them fucking cheering about being hypocrites amongst themselves in church buildings. All right, well, yeah, no, it's you see, if it weren't for this judgment of blood, then there'd be some argument to like me experiencing paternal nurture from my father's side and watching a father versus mother line up for the duration while going to kindergarten class, and watching the wind up and watching that duration. Instead I was deprived of it and not told why or how, or shown how, but it's just stupid, because the complete measure of whether my family thrives or collapses in terms of us being a integral support unit is, you know, respecting each other's individuality, which if you're not going to be questioned about something that is obviously philosophically deep, if it's indeed going to be judged to be deep enough for people to say things to police and to psych reports up about a video to go, well, this voiceover, like, it's not it. If in your heart you hate bisexuals and you think bisexuals weren't meant to exist because you love the crucifixion so much, just get the fuck away from this category of art. It was not made for you. It's explicitly elucidated in interview after interview by the creating artists themselves that this type of art is not made with you in mind. You are not being thought about when this art is made for. You are considered among the vitriolic despots that get sexual arousal from sitting back and watching the suffrage of our kind, while we take no pleasure from the suffrage of any kind except those who are out to abolish fundamental rights, the basic rights. So I'll leave it at that. I'll try and see if it'll get blamed on taking too much Panadeine Forte. If they go, you've got gastrointestinal problems, I'll say, I'll call them Sydney stones. Because I got taken out of kindy and they taught me nothing about my kidney. So if I take too much Panadeine Forte, because, you know, what's stupid is that you can get codeine phosphate prescribed on authority in bulk, which has... Panadeine Forte is a combined product that contains what America calls acetaminophen or Tylenol in the brand name, but it's called here paracetamol or Panadol in the brand name, and combine it 500 milligram tablets with 30 milligrams of codeine phosphate. Now, it's the kidneys, liver, whatever produces lactic acid, produces enough of it so much as to break down a gram's worth of induction every 4 to 6 hours. It's shitty short term. But if you know paracetamol to be no pain reliever whatsoever, the product is otherwise just 30 milligrams of codeine per tablet. And it's available to, you're allowed to get access to, it exists as a product and on the PBS and all of that, codeine phosphate 30 milligram per tablet, and that's the only active substance. So if you need to take higher amounts of codeine, the trade-off is that you're suffering your digestive tract to some extent, because you won't be producing enough lactic acid to break down the paracetamol without suffering your guts. Which you could argue is because Big Pharma want you on things like Nexium, later esomeprazole or omeprazole, or that drugs in that category, because you're still getting that 30 milligram of codeine, and you have control over your intake. I've yet to learn how to practice these. There is apparently coffee filter water separation techniques. You can dissolve the filters will catch the pour water over the filter, and the tablets on the filter, and the codeine's water soluble, and closer to nature is the codeine, and it will go through the filter into drinkable water form, while the paracetamol, mostly is caught inside the filter, and then you drink the water. But there's often, because it's a drug, you often don't want to use it, or a product you don't want to use it, or when you do go to get it, is it's when you're in a last resort state of mind. You've been awake for 2 nights. Yeah. Maybe between Big Pharma and street drugs, they think because I didn't like my mother's breast milk when she was lactating, and because I've taken acid as an adult, that I might, through some street drug ambiguity, have extra lactic acid to account for the extra paracetamol that I don't want to take as a drug at all. I hate the molecule. I hate it on a molecular level. But you have to take extra to get to the codeine, or you have to be doing this filtering shit. There's just not enough time. But anyway, that might be what my family might think with their theoretics on street drugs. So I can go kill, rape, eat everyone, and shit on everyone. The other thing is body language analysts and what goes into that. So a report on my CT scan from some years back said the inner ear cavities normally aerate bilaterally, but it wasn't saying whether they're not now because of an impediment. And what that reflected on some level was the CT scan, the MRI machine was designed by a Christian. And what that means is everything that went into the construction of the technology included the assumption or preclusion of life-giving, what is life-giving, involving the absolute murder and concealment of the murder of Jesus of Nazareth. So if any type of profiling were to be concluded, which is simply the same thing as moving from supernaturalism back to naturalism, or forwards to naturalism, because there was a time when people found that a rock that could be used to make a wooden knife was then amazed at someone that could make a bow, and they say it on Star Trek that the most advanced form of technology is indistinguishable from God, and that's why they always have had their prime directive, which has been, unless they can conceal a means to study the behaviours of pre-war civilizations, which are civilizations that are yet to develop not only starships, but starships that can travel at least the factor of warp 1, or the speed of light, then there is to be no political intervention between humans or the Federation and that planet. But however, if they could put up like a holographic shield of a rock wall surface, and native villagers can't tell the difference between the hollow emitted rock wall surface, and then there's a bunch of, like a research station behind it, there's like very slim chance that a native is going to collapse the way that they've been studied. So the prime directive then is arguably not violated, but if anything goes wrong with the study, then it is and has. But anyway, and then what happens is that the natives of that planet revere the starship as if it was like a god. But yeah, what I was about to say, so the fuckers that love the crucifixion come up with all these theories, like if you hold your arms out each sideways, neither side, in like a T shape, it's like you're trying to signal that you have horrid wrongs on that you've committed for which you may deserve the death penalty, and things like shit like that. Like, they come up with the gayest of fucking theories in the fucking world. It's no wonder. It's actually, on that level, it's been quite daring of chicks to go starfish, because like they're already doing they're already making the stance with their arms. So I actually don't recognize the term that must be between anatomic girls and girls who starfish, fucking starfish. I'm like, hey, at least he'll get himself crucified, like, but risking it from the upper torso. And now that's enough from me. Here's Tom with the weather. Which is a rather long phrase question, for which I apologise, for the Commonwealth and Magistrates' consideration, is this. If Roger Mark B. Nelson's Hall of Capital Chemist Group, primarily I would call him the ringleader, but I try to, I know that it will connote to his excitement in various ways. It'll make him think of one part of my body, and B, it will make him think of getting away from his wife. Is to have employed me for 9 years, only to have, with no disclosure of workers' rights or a contractual arrangement, constantly saying, "Oh, we're testing you for eligibility." Was constantly, repeatedly a false sexual accoster, without knowing that I was not a material witness, or asking if I was or was not a material witness to the conflict that separated my parents, but precluded that I was, that I enjoyed it, that it was part of my sexual arousal that had happened, and was to, and then he then therefore constituted an enslaver, an abductor, unless I was to agree to see him as a sort of sex symbol or a respectable mentor. The only time I could ever be fooled into not throwing an object at him is if I had so many drugs in my system. You have no idea. But him being all these things needs to mean at least that the Commonwealth prevent him on all grounds from having any input whatsoever into even thinking he can comment on my health status, because he's doing so in abscondence of justice and the courts. So I'll say that openly and on the web. I don't really care. There you go, Lord of the fucking Rings. Go vacuum the floor of your bitch's bookshop. But yeah, dickheads. The art that I'm into has always been about. So you preclude because of what you do in your religion, that if you see a burnt cross on an album cover, that the artist, even though the burning cross doesn't have Jesus on the cross while it's burning, is therefore wanting to kill Jesus. You can't assume that, or nor can you assume that they're a member of the KKK, who are in fact a Christian division. That, well, I think Dave Chappelle represented their agenda pretty fucking smooth. But we have our right in our own ways to say, to question ourselves out of the attrition from your religion. And you have a right to it, but I have a right to choose my friends. So you don't have a right to spy on me, because I know I can argue to. I mean, I'm writing a book about this. I've won every debate I've ever had with anyone about this, any polite discussion about this. If there's any conclusion that can be reached, that's what it is. The diametrically opposed opposite, psychologically speaking, to proud inbreeders, is a non-inbred bilateral brain. So if they're running a kingdom and they're all inbreeding for purity of bloodline's sake, then they're going to zone in and target by instinct on the most bilateral brain they can find, and that's that. So, as long as you love this story, history will just repeat its errors, and just change the cosmetics a bit. From Ziggy Stardust, the Bow song 5 Years, I loved the first time I would watch the clip. I found it to be eye-piercing, and I would think about it was like, on your feet, man. Like, you know, by then I had noticed enough observational elements of histrionics repeating itself in regards to dynamics in the company mother would keep, pitfalls and perils and betrayals in my own, been held in states of non-disclosure, but negative suspense that's not going to have any. And it's 5 years. That's all we've got. But then I would think too about religion being really in conjunction with the mind opening itself to learning, and that's when preschool. By the time you reach age 5, you're young enough to be a kindergarten student. But what I think about this born again concept and how I talk about this, if there was a double-edged sword, it's Christianity's double-ended bind, or double-ended inexplicit or inexplicated wedge at either end. The concealment of a kingdom's dispatched false accuser, resulting in, to say that Jesus' death was a murder-suicide is like, while it strips it of the supernatural overtones, it's actually whatever the word would be for it is horribly more barbaric, containing sex offences, violence offences, being left pegged as a token of mockery in front of everyone while suffering, struggling to breathe, the diaphragm, having to push weight against the nails, penetrating both, piercing through both of your legs, crossed over at the ankles, in order to push the chest up enough to continue drawing breath. So it's why I'm still able to have these phases where I appreciate some Christian artists, jars of clay. But it's when they get into the real theological prose that I detach. So I like their lines like, "He didn't die for nothing." I just don't say that he died for me or you, and you won't know what having respect for the dead or dying is, and I don't think really, and so long as you're making Arnott's Scotch finger biscuits out of covering up for the essentially the equivalent of a police dispatch going, "Are you boogie? Are you nigger G banger number 1?" It's while enslavement is against, while enslavement against Negroes is celebrated at the highest level of government, you don't ask people that you've already enslaved to answer to the charge of bearing the highest possible achievable ranks of a kingdom that has already excluded them from being a part of, by definition. So the double-edged sword is that cover up of that. You're not actually defending Jesus' principle from the unjust death. You're defending the guy that asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" by calling Jesus the king of the Jews later because you fear an inbred kingdom. So they're even using titles like born again in Christology, born again Christian. But what I think when this cover up it's like one edge, all four of these gospels, even when the chronology is corrected, but it ties back into justifying Genesis, the book of Genesis, and going, well, so all this happened and he gave his life of his own volition so that you can be, don't feel bad about, well, you never felt bad about incest. That was perfect. You can impregnate your rib. You can do a lot of things with that. I mean, that's versatile. Are you sick of jacking off in a garden and before the Lord Almighty, because he's male too? Be careful, because he's the only one that can call you a homo erectus in such. But so, well, then why not remove a rib? They'll use terms like boner in the future, but for now we'll make a biatch for you out of that absent rib, and she'll be treated absent-minded for centuries and centuries to follow. Even pregnancy was likened to, the male was likened to a farmer scattering seeds into dirt. The woman was not credited to have contributed to the biology of the offspring in any way. She was just an incubator, and that's the other edge of the double-edged sword. Is yet apples. If should she eat an apple? I suppose what eating that apple might antagonize him about, or pomegranate, is on its way down her digestive tract. It bypassed, and perhaps upon discussion, the disclosure of the insanity to the base claim that all womankind originated from a rib in the first place. So, what's guarding her digestive tract, if not for her own rib cage? But anyway, so you get that incest was either ideologically cheered as the only way to keep blood pure, or ideologically upheld and practiced as the only way to keep a bloodline, a family bloodline pure. And that's why Christianity is so I see it as being like I would destroy my 5-year loopology if I could. And fuck knows, I have a backlog of counter convergence, attrition types, typologies and types against me trying to marshal myself to endurance, if not recovery. But what I see Christianity sort of doing is, it's like you're wanting to ask for that curse, even if you should be, blessed to enjoy the libertinage from it. Because it's a two wrongs. It's the epitome of two wrongs. How two wrongs don't make a right. It's the ultimate example. So I'm convinced that the only thing to overturn statements like don't believe in history because history repeats itself is really demonstrable by applying our falsifiability efforts at it to ourselves, where it applies to ourselves, that we can evolve further. The other consideration that like Pink Floyd, and been this is the age that you'll attain before you're initiated into formal education, and then there have been detrimental effects of education. What to this day still has not been added, at least not even to supplement as if to create a seesaw effect or a countermeasure, like the scales of justice, is to have freedom of religion and freedom from religion not equally stated. One to the exclusion of the other is instead, and it's always freedom of religion, and that multiplying out. So whatever these Freemasons and these other people that think they can bring polytheism into monism, are always going to still exclude the unbeliever. And so once anthropomorphic imaginary beings ascribe the source of all moral codes of conduct, then there's the natural disposition for bias towards a non-theologian, to therefore be anti-moral, counter-moral. No, and so, yeah, religion has always played some part as we build up to. It's disappointing. You get out of school only to read that the definition of a human per Human Rights Act is to entail non-human connotations. As every church building will tell you, ways in which you are non-human. And so what's it doing on a Human Rights Act? Oh, and there happens to be a Mental Health Act just like right around the next corner. And yet they never think to go, well, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, or the golden rule. Why don't we put freedom from religion explicated, or remove freedom of religion from human rights? Because what's indisputable is that so long as what's known through empiricism about it, the human qualities, haven't overturned Bronze Age concepts, then they're subhuman, and even anti-human, denial of human, to the definition. And then with that sexy story in that garden, which I think it does counts for all temper flares. You don't get a counter argument from adherents. You just get why they will lash out in fits of biphobic pred, all manners of abduction, all manners of sex offences, all manners of force of violence offences against non-biphobes, by inbreds who will be biphobes, because that's what fucking yourselves for reproductive sake is. The purity of German blood. I was reading articles about Hitler, his micropenis and corpophagia. He's into eating poo, not the army, not the corpse. In that sense. So it's interesting. We've got the new strand of the coroner's virus, after which he can take the day off, kick back and wind down with coroner beer, and if in the mood for some parody, listen to Weird Al Yankovic's 9 Coronas, the parody of My Sharona. But yeah, given the choice, I'd eat. I'm an incessant media skeptic, and it's not because of being omitted in Australian newspaper reports about my initial family split when I was 5 from newspaper reports. It's because of watching. My grandfather was a person who was constantly in a state of lament about going well. It's always sad stories they want to tell. That girl was getting 60 minutes drilled, Sarah, someone, perhaps. It's not anything personal. I actually consider what the media do to be dehumanizing and what journalists do to be dehumanizing, because how can a journalist have the call it guts to talk to that lady the way she did and try and tell her she has to choose between one parent or the other, hate one and love the other. What that shows me is things like, well, that journalist wouldn't have, she might be a cunt, but she wouldn't stand to drill Capital Chemist, for instance, because they're a corporation with ties to land right owners and Freemason churches. Fuck that. I'm going to pick on this girl who's lost her parents. So you go, well, it's very hard then to respect 60 Minutes journalists. The fact they're calling themselves 60 Minutes just makes me think they got together and fucking fingered each other to a Clockwork Orange and then thought, I better make it red instead of orange. And then for the logo at least, and then off they went as a team. I think they take on ideals personally the people deserve to know the truth, the reports, and they do all these forms of privacy invasion. And one thing I know about a privacy invader is they need to be able to justify rightfully and to know that they can say how and why they're justifying what they do rightfully, at least amongst themselves. They don't consider the courts, and within one reason they're not allowed in for the hearings in most cases. So if you're ever concerned with a drama and you're aware that the media coverage doesn't permit them into courts, that they're into religion that says pray to and worship and love a God who is jealous, and they all add indemnity to jealousy as a virtue, just like as well as the stupidity that faith is a virtue as well. Belief or trust that does not question or ask for any proof. Well, so much for why you have any recourse to saying you're out to justify statements like freedom of the press, because the people deserve to know the truth. You've just said you will be emotionally jealous because it's a godlike quality, and that you'll act out of blind faith at the same time. So, yeah, it's a fucking good right thing too that you're not allowed in the courts, though that inspires more jealousy and more faith in journalists in general. So what I then even realized was that, well, we're not only not getting the full story, we're probably getting them doing things like going, oh, look at how people are in suspense, statistically speaking, from watching soap operas and wondering if Patch and Kayla will get back together on Days of Our Lives. They're all so sad that they're not. That's if we could only capture that state of suspense. This is the sort of thing jealous cunts want, and the media, mainstream media, is very good at that. So I have my appreciation for Judge Judy. I like her. Samuel L. Jackson likes her, and there could be disputes about the morality of courtroom TV, but it's better than the media. From Ziggy Stardust, Bow song 5 Years, I loved the first time I would watch the clip. I found it to be eye-piercing. And I would think about, it was like, on your feet, man. Like, you know, by then I had noticed enough observational elements of histrionics repeating itself in regards to dynamics in the company mother would keep. Pitfalls and perils and betrayals and my own, been held in states of non-disclosure, but negative suspense that's not going to have any. And it's 5 years. That's all we've got. But then I would think too about religion being really in conjunction with the mind opening itself to learning. And that's when preschool, by the time you reach age 5, you're young enough to be a kindergarten student. But what I think about this born again concept and how I talk about this, if there was a double-edged sword, it's Christianity's double-ended bind, or double-ended inexplicit or inexplicated wedge at either end, the concealment of a kingdom's dispatched false accuser, resulting in, if to say that Jesus' death was a murder-suicide is like, while it strips it of the supernatural overtones, it's actually whatever the word would be for it is horribly more barbaric, containing sex offences, violence offences, being left pegged as a token of mockery in front of everyone while suffering, struggling to breathe, the diaphragm having to push weight against the nails, penetrating both, piercing through both of your legs crossed over at the ankles in order to push the chest up enough to continue drawing breath. So it's why I'm still able to have these phases where I appreciate some Christian artists, jars of clay. But it's when they get into the real theological prose that I detach. So I like their lines like, he didn't die for nothing. I just don't say that he died for me or you, and you won't know what having respect for the dead or dying is. And I don't think really, and so long as you're making Arnott's Scotch finger biscuits out of covering up for the essentially the equivalent of a police dispatch going to, are you boogie? Are you nigger G banger number 1? It's while enslavement is against, while enslavement against Negroes is celebrated at the highest level of government, you don't ask people that you've already enslaved to answer to the charge of bearing the highest possible achievable ranks of a kingdom that has already excluded them from being a part of, by definition. So the double-edged sword is that cover-up of that. Say you're not actually defending Jesus' principle from the unjust death. You're defending the guy that asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" by calling Jesus the king of the Jews later because you fear an inbred kingdom. So they're even using titles like born again in Christology. born again Christian. But what I think when this cover up it's like one edge, or all four of these gospels, even when the chronology is corrected, but it ties back into justifying Genesis, the book of Genesis, and going, well, so all this happened and he gave his life of his own volition so that you can be, don't feel bad about, well, you never felt bad about incest. That was perfect. You can impregnate your rib. You can do a lot of things with that. I mean, that's versatile. Are you sick of jacking off in a garden and before the Lord Almighty, because he's male too? Be careful, because he's the only one that can call you a homo erectus in such. But so, well, then why not remove a rib? They'll use terms like boner in the future, but for now we'll make a biatch for you out of that absent rib, and she'll be treated absent-minded for centuries and centuries to follow. Even pregnancy was likened to, the male was likened to a farmer scattering seeds into dirt. The woman was not credited to have contributed to the biology of the offspring in any way. She was just an incubator, and that's the other edge of the double-edged sword. Yet apples. If should she eat an apple? I suppose what eating that apple might antagonize him about, or pomegranate, is on its way down her digestive tract. It bypassed, and perhaps upon discussion, the disclosure of the insanity to the base claim that all womankind originated from a rib in the first place. Saying, what's guarding her digestive tract, if not for her own rib cage? But anyway, so you get that incest was either ideologically cheered as the only way to keep blood pure, or ideologically upheld and practiced as the only way to keep a bloodline, a family bloodline pure. And that's why Christianity is so I see it as being like I would destroy my 5-year loopology if I could. And fuck knows, I have a backlog of counter convergence, attrition types, typologies and types against me trying to marshal myself to endurance, if not recovery. But what I see Christianity sort of doing is, it's like you're wanting to ask for that curse, even if you should be, blessed to enjoy the libertinage from it. Because it's a two wrongs. It's the epitome of two wrongs. How two wrongs don't make a right. It's the ultimate example. So I'm convinced that the only thing to overturn statements like don't believe in history because history repeats itself is really demonstrable by applying our falsifiability efforts at it to ourselves, where it applies to ourselves, that we can evolve further. The the other consideration that, like Pink Floyd, and been, this is the age that you'll attain before you're initiated into formal education. And then there have been detrimental effects of education. What to this day still has not been added, at least not even to supplement as if to create a seesaw effect or a countermeasure, like the scales of justice, is to have freedom of religion and freedom from religion not equally stated. One to the exclusion of the other is instead, and it's always freedom of religion, and that multiplying out. So whatever these Freemasons and these other people that think they can bring polytheism into monism, are always going to still exclude the unbeliever. And so once anthropomorphic imaginary beings ascribe the source of all moral codes of conduct, then there's the natural disposition for bias towards a non-theologian, to therefore be anti-moral, counter-moral. And so, yeah, religion has always played some part as we build up to. It's disappointing. You get out of school only to read that the definition of a human per Human Rights Act is to entail non-human connotations. As every church building will tell you, ways in which you are non-human. And so what's it doing on a Human Rights Act? Oh, there happens to be a Mental Health Act just like right around the next corner. And yet they never think to go, well, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, or the golden rule. Why don't we put freedom from religion and explicated, or remove freedom of religion from human rights? Because what's indisputable is that so long as what's known through empiricism about it, the human qualities, haven't overturned Bronze Age concepts, then they're subhuman, and even anti-human, denial of human, to the definition. And then with that sexy story in that garden, which I think it does counts for all temper flares. You don't get a counter argument from adherents. You just get why they will lash out in fits of biphobic pred, all manners of abduction, all manners of sex offences, all manners of force of violence offences against non-biphobes by inbreds who will be biphobes, because that's what fucking yourselves for reproductive sake is. The purity of German blood. I was reading articles about Hitler, his micropenis and corpophagia. He was into eating poo, not the army, not the corpse. In that sense, though it's interesting. We've got the new strand of the coroner's virus. After which he can take the day off, kick back and wind down with coroner beer, and if in the mood for some parody, listen to Weird Al Yankovic's 9 Coronas, the parody of My Sharona. But yeah, given the choice, I'd eat factor that's even ambiguous in terms of Markian the Markan source, is that you'll have to do contrasting of different Bibles before you'll Bible publishing companies before you'll find the resurrection to be a stated footnote, generally by footnote interpolation, not found in the original and best manuscripts. That they wanted to, I think, hope that the majority of readers would want it to be more so than check if it was. It is perfect reason to place Matthew volumetrically ahead of the Gospel of Mark, which contains at the time of Jesus' death surrounding it mass grave resurrections of all the Old Testament, the whole cast of Happy Days, Fons and Zechariah the third, and Zechariah Reich the third, and they all come back and go, whoa. But this ambiguity, I think, was desired because overall the story tells of a kingdom not wanting to admit that its shit stinks, and they'd remove the story altogether to achieve that best, but they didn't know how, which is another justification for at least the existence of a person to base all these narratives around, and a person that has to have been truly different from the aforementioned, the many times over aforementioned inbreds by idealist conformity or idealism, held boldly and practiced for bloodline purity, and so the bilateral, the killing and then falling in love with after killing, post-mortem, of a bilateral individual is the ultimate end game for them. And then they even continue to go and trying to find more purpose to justify the concealments without admitting to the true histrionics of the Gospels in the canon, nor the inclusion of the Apocrypha, before they start throwing in concepts like, Lucifer's about to come around the corner with the Antichrist, blah, blah, the Wicked Witch and Wicked Witch of the East, and blah, blah, blah. I think that ambiguity, that what's been concealed, is that as you progress, those who are consolidating all four, they're really worshipping the guy that the dispatch copper. So we can't even know were his instructions to directly accuse with the words, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Like, accuse this man of being the king of the Jews, because that kingdom would know enough to know that that's an inappropriate question to pass down to the conquereds of a kingdom. So I think that's in parallel reflected in the ambiguity in terms of descriptions of depths of interpolitical relations between King Herod's kingdom and the Roman Empire, as well as what I've called Mary pegging, which is like, boost the soundability of the Eve story with Jesus' mother's name is Mary, and she conceives as a virgin. Jesus falls in love with a Mary who's a whore. When Jesus comes back from the dead, he's met by Mary and another Mary. And why an example. See, there was a time when I could speak this and type. I could write perhaps more eloquently on no substances, since the injuries and the bad beginning to 2010. You know, where I was suffered most was at the chemist. They were to have known more. They would have been subversive in terms of, subpoena to learn about things about me, information about me, and non-disclosive of that to me, as well as non-disclosive of workers' rights to me by a contractual workers' arrangement. And I've got this nasal cyst from about the year 2004, where at what time, because all I knew from my point of view was that, well, we are putting you through a test situation. But in their minds they were going, well, these are his announced beliefs, this art, so all songs, by their own token, and that's why I said that they've really got to evaluate while Lucifer and God are anthropomorphic beings in the Masonic religion, in a state of rebellion against one another, doing everything but fucking, having intercourse. They go on to call all homosexuals unnatural. And they fall back on simplistic arguments. How would they reproduce? Otherwise, how do you gauge? Is it statistically? A monkey may impregnate an opposite-sex monkey while having them exhausted the majority of its intercoursal activities with same-sex monkeys. Could the survival instinct could override the equivocation of homosexuality with hatred of the opposite sex is, I think, a byproduct of the supernatural agenda. Whether they're trying to say that they want to be supportive or endorsive and encouraging and recognizing of equal rights for other than hetero sex identifications. Religion doesn't seem to be able to achieve it without suggesting an arch nemesis, which has to be an enemy image in terms of a sex health identity enemy image. So Gary Kans and Roger Toll keep their religion hidden, claim it doesn't skew their profession, define homosexuals as someone whose responsibility comes from the rebellion against their own sexuality, without even addressing whether these people gave them the right to privacy invasion sufficient to gain all the metadata on their idiosyncrasies, or whether this is simply conversational spin-offs of marginalization as a group. But the same sort of false dichotomies go on with what I think is the byproduct of saying it's a human right that you have freedom of religion, but not also, which would be in fairness of the religion's own golden rule, to say that you have freedom from religion too. Is as byproducts of that, they'll have you think, well, if you don't believe in terms of pledge to be in following of a God, then you are in belief in and pledge to the following of a devil. So a false dichotomy is a either or, like you're at you can see two. You're given the view of two paths and forced to choose to take one or the other, but both lead in the wrong directions, and there can be yeah, we're one path or option to a dichotomy, a 2-point dichotomy, can, per contrast to the other, juxtaposed against the other, seem more right or wrong per that contrast. There can nonetheless be third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh option, additional or alternative options not suggested or then therefore avoided, absconded via the questioner, and this type of thinking is only further, by not confronting you with parallels like the ambiguity of the political relations between the first century Roman Empire and the kingdom to King Herod, the non-disclosure of King Herod's queen and her interests pertaining to Jesus, despite all this Mary pegging, the Jews being a conquered people and Jesus being accused of being the king of the Jews. All these ambiguities not being, there's parallels. There's almost like a triad parallelogram right there. Conquered people, Roman Empire, and King Herod's kingdom. And as I was writing about then, comprehension. So when I talk about these topics of, these are things that I loathe and reject, and admittingly, reality is what the majority have made and brought to us. So you can select your friends, but you can only do so much about who's and if they go, why keep bringing up this topic? Well, then they're not invites, unless you're to submit a written or discursive debate or response or argument. Do so. I have no intention to do that comfortably without any violations of the four rights that I think are more important than anything to do with religion, life, health, movement, and expression. But yet you'll take this freedom of religion and use it to abolish all the other four in their entirety. When you can get away with it, especially as businesses. So what I find I deal with is I'm trying to organize my shit. In protest, there's my lavatory is a shrine of protest to imposed impediments, because if it's been known what drugs you were given when employed and recovering, or given the opportunity to recover, is now about 1/3 to 1/4 of the potency and drug scope and range that you're now getting, then how does it not constitute like chemical attempts to chemically compromise someone's ability to meet the legal principle, much less get from cleaning the bathroom and toilet to washing the clothes, the kitchen, vacuuming the floor, and then addressing the legal principle. Is something that medicinal drugs, particularly given the company that I'd much prefer be amongst than here, is you'd have to forfeit the complete psychic profile to even explain why I have even been here in the first place. But that's what you'll do with bilaterals, two bilaterals. Yeah. We're things, we're concepts, our sexual mistreatment, our physical mistreatment, and our abductions, even if it's in municipals that I mean, in my case, given my municipals, the cops are, the AFP are responsible for the divide, for the deprivation of my paternity, that is in my parents, from kindergarten and thereafter. And with no, and as they accuse me of, and held me in contempt or thought that a slap on the wrist or any type of rudimentary correction was to make me bear a revamped, completely premeditative, mentality, essentially frame my estranged parent's mentality through me, without giving me the option or opportunity to have even a police supervised reconciliatory conversation. And that is grave robbing. The police assistance effort that gained me the job at Capital Chemist concerning the fragrance shoplifter, that police officer, they knew with me, and they knew with me growing up, and I knew enough from their manner to know they'd have to have read about my story, because they'd be politer than I'd either see on the news or hear other people speak of the police in their regard. Would be like, well, can you help us with this? But they essentially don't understand that, if they've got a case that they think I'm out to want to harm myself or someone else, they have to be inbred as fuck in the head, because there's no, for me and for that age and for what I've lived through, there's no openness to motion towards love than to abolish and loathe the reality that that I was born into. So, I'd argue that if it was known that well, he's still got the same nasal sinus mucosa cyst that from 2004. It's grown. Because he was getting rebates for Capital Chemist, they've moved the Webster room to the other side of the shop. Claimed that if I say that they were giving me the cheap but symptomatically effective drugs from other people's cancelled prescriptions, because waste not, want not, why throw out to the endone into the pharmacy waste bin when it could go into my mouth? And why not was I later to be robbed from my front lawn when I was living in Downer in 2010. Because they knew that, well, they have this, if you're not with us, you're against us. And knowing I'm a non-believer, they at least had that. Telling me I had to be gay meant that they were abducting me, because I was robbed of a relationship with my father. So Roger and Gary were both into that. Saying it's genetic was to bind their, what they were stamping as private and confidential information, privileged information that you're not of a higher enough standing yet to have explained to you, but would need to be explained in order to exonerate them from abduction. No, it's only really when we learn enough in high school about when genes are in a state of being receptive and then expressive, and there's at least that differentiation. But you can be in another state and territory while there's a domestic conflict going on between your parents, and the religionists will say you've inherited the motive of whoever was acting the worst, particularly if it's the male, and they're only talking about blood there. And they're talking about blood in a theocratic sense too. They're not talking about me getting me on Rag Week, which is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to Monday for the Christian, Easter Friday through to Resurrection Monday. Second Coming Monday. More, it is not me saying, haha, like I'm making an escape. This is, again, I would call your resurrection fallacy. It's why I make these puns about, rising again for a second coming, all over your face, were it not, or Arnott's biscuits down your wafered fucking mouths firsthand, before you get at the juicy drops of cheese's crust. To not have endured the deprivations would mean I'd be in the company I seek, and also with more energy from having received nurture during early schooling and whatever, to be more competitive. Mistreated by a pharmacy chain, you don't. I actually don't like prescription. Like, I really don't. And that's not another you following God or the devil. So therefore, in saying that, you're saying you like and only want street drugs. And I want what I need to survive. That's all, and that's something that you don't understand. But if you instead want to reverse it into a impending criminal charge, I'm truly scrawny. I would demonstrate letting girls beat me up in front of classmates, because I'd be like, fuck, at least with what they're saying, with what I know they're saying about genetics and shit, let me, and you not saying or giving full disclosure to what talk's going on behind my back, at least let me show you that I'll have my head smacked into the corner of a desk, classroom desk, till my ears piercing blood, and not without blocking or retaliating. And that's not a sacrificial gesture. It was really the only defense that I sort of understood at the time on the basis of talk. But who splits the difference between known mechanics of genes and blood, or religion versus religiously separate scientific approaches to the mechanics of DNA? And so I'm sensitive to entire lives being ruined, and parents will make their own kids retarded just because of this, how sexually sickening and violent this holy story of the Bible is to them. And with a God with the attributes omnimax, all powerful, all knowing, all everywhere. Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is impotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh all the fucking evil? And is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? Was a question posed at the advent of Christianity. At the same time, missionaries are going on ships to China to try and preach Christianity, and the emperor would turn back and say, well, what does this savior have to do with the benefit of the good people of China? And I'd be like, we were hoping you wouldn't ask that. So yeah, if they don't want to say it in terms of treat others as you'd have them treat you, their iteration of the golden rule that they love so much, then what about for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, or basic concepts of balance, A equals A, fucking A cannot equal not A minus A, and just put freedom of religion and freedom from religion, stated equally on the Charter. So the Marquis de Sade, this as well has been an inspirational author in terms of style of prose. What I don't know about his histrionics is the reality of his character, aside from him having empathy for lower class. He lived in a time when the printing press had then bridged the divide between upper class people being the only ones able to afford scribes to buy quill and parchment, hand copy desired literature acquisitions. And so once again, and it's complementary to how accurate testimony about Jesus of Nazareth, the human, could endure 30 odd years after the execution. These words were like, and to expand a vocabulary, that you see it in films like From Hell, the upper class, the Freemasons, and then the peasants. The way that they're able to talk is enough to coerce, the lower. So maybe there's something to be said for there being. But what I think they got the gist and spirit of, because if the Marquis de Sade stepped down from a classier kind of regal standing, just to get put into an insane asylum after having built a literary fan base, and it's said to have been a known historical fact that he's one of his books, 120 Days of Sodom, he thought was lost forever during the storming of the Bastille in France. Terms like S&M, sadomasochism, are named after de Sade, Donatien Francois Alphonse de Sade, aka the Marquis de Sade. And my favourite piece by him is a very short one called Dialogue Between a Priest and a Dying Man, but I think it's the one that the director of the film Quills had in mind for the character, the character dynamics and all the turns and plot twists that subsist between the Abbé, played by Joaquin Phoenix, and the Marquis himself, while at the Sheraton Insane Asylum, played by Jeffrey Rush. So it would be known that, while he was there was still demand for his literature. It was black market, but public wanted his books. Napoleon Bonaparte said of his novel Justine that it's the most abominable novel ever engineered by the most depraved imagination. And they were known to raid homes, search a family for possession of a Marquis de Sade novel or novels. If having found them, confiscate them and then destroy them in public view burnings to deter additional. So his literature was therefore well sought out for this to happen. And one thing that was argued is, well, what the Marquis saw more depth in conflict with the pursuit of love, and his statements like the urge towards love pushed to its limits is an urge towards death, rather than while distancing himself and saying, art. His question in Quills isn't the duty of art to elevate us above the beast, and he turns back to the Abbé and says, I would have thought that was your duty, Abbé, not mine. Which is funny on two levels, because Christianity fails to achieve that goal anyway, and that it's held to the egos of ministers and such. That's what their missionary position, despite being without a partner, is all about. And so what you get about what he's doing is that it's satirical. There's so many horrid aspects to the biblical story that what he does is makes them worse in fiction. So the Marquis de Sade's agenda was not to a movement called the Libertines. He is credited to have inspired, and that was about sexual liberation. This divide was huge. If you can imagine that, if you were in the poverty or peasant class, you would not know how to say certain words. They would just not be in your vocabulary. So to acquire them would be like various, like iPad Touch, and so he wrote to them, having stepped down from, it's as if he found the bureaucracy of his own, the class into which he was born to be to his boredom. So I've always found that amusing, and it comes through in his writings. He's in no, I mean, he'll say, this is to his credit over the Bibles, he'll say, this is disgusting. Like, what I'm reading to you is this. What I'm writing to you is absolutely fucking atrocious. He's calling that out. But where do you have it in the Bible that the Bible's calling itself out and its own content out as reprehensible? You have the Moses story where, after the Ten Commandments are read, that at the site of the worship of a golden bull calf, Moses has what would today be called a schizophrenic fit, smashes the stone tablets, and orders a mass suicide because on the grounds that they had worshipped a false idol or something to that effect. And when I talk about Jesus being, by his teaching the Son of Man and by the stealing of a horse or colt, been against the Ten Commandments, that doesn't mean I'm saying he was in favor of killing. I'm just saying he didn't need Moses the hypocrite, he didn't need to think of telling himself, I better not kill anyone, because Moses said so, is what I'm trying to say. And Moses broke his own code anyway, immediately, just because golden calves are shinier than him in his 40 days, making them walk through the sea of reeds. A low-tide marsh, as distinct from the Red Sea, which, if you're a party to, whether you're a party to believing that water, you can walk on the surface of water or turn water vertical ways into walls to leave a sandy path to navigate through, I believe neither, but what's unbelievable is that these Ten Commandments get talked about as though. And that's how unilateralists are. They go, well, are you for or against the Ten Commandments? They go, well, I don't care if a person rides a horse that is not theirs. I think that's, what was it? No graven images. That's what the Danish cartoonist did with the Prophet Muhammad. That led to the jihad on him and the Islamic riotary reaction to all of that. I know that was a bit of cartoonish satire. So you have to ask yourself, like, in the scheme of things, is saying something like, bear an open mind concerning rights to freedom of linguistic expression. Is that more important than a graven image, which seems to be like the non-original cultural portrayal of a character from another culture is an offence to the original culture? Well, that has Genesis in Islam at odds with Genesis in the Judeo-Christian tradition, as indeed within themselves, Genesis 1 against Genesis 2 in terms of the order of creation man before animals, and all of that. So, anyway, yeah. Why step down from a regal position as such as that of what the Marquis had, to write all this fiction that would offend a war general? And it was one of the earliest times in history when he got to put forward the question, like, this is not a moral treatise, like, and if you want to enter in that discussion. So, because what when he writes about the 120 days of Sodom, that book is like he goes into day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and talks of all the sexual obscenities that go on in the town of Sodom. What goes on? What biblicists want people and Christians to think of more about the town of Sodom is someone turning back to look at the town and turning into a pillar of salt or something. But what's more disgusting about that story of that town is that there's some angels turn up to visit, and they're the townspeople are so into kink that they had planned to rape both of these angels that had arrived at the gates to the town of Sodom. And then the wisest man in the town comes forward saying, look, rather than rape these angels, please take my daughters from me and I give you my daughters to rape. And he was thought to have been the wisest man in that town. He didn't want his town to get the reputation to be a party to having community members who are out to rape angels. So, that's there. That's in the Bible, that if a virgin's raped, she can be purchased as a wife for 50 shekels, payable to the father. That's there. But so the Marquis de Sade isn't adding his stamp of approval to any of this. He's confronting early existential conundrums and is said to have inspired Nietzsche and Freud. But questions, stand back questions like, well, what is human nature all about? In Quills, he says, I write of the eternal truths that bind mankind the whole world over. We eat, we shit, we fuck, we kill, and we die. And then the Abbe goes, yes, but we also fall in love and write symphonies and, go to the opera. And he goes, well, once again, it's a fiction, not a moral treatise. But that was the irony about what the Marquis did, and the fact that he stepped down from such social standing to go, well, the printing press is out, and I will even, while being detained in an insane asylum, the linen ladies dispatched to collect his dirty laundry were known to slip out as contraband. Some of his he was given privilege to write on parchment with feathered quills. It was thought to be a means for him to exercise demonic influence by the Christian management at the psychiatric facility at Charenton in France. So he was allowed to continue to write book manuscript drafts there, and so then when linen lady would come by collect the linen, he'd pass a manuscript for a new book to the linen lady. She'd pass it out to a guy on horseback. Dude on horseback would ride off and get it to a publishing company. And they'd start threatening him with confiscating his basic items because his means to write, because he managed to publish a few books from while detained within the asylum. And I find that truly inspiring, because what I think his readers understood was that because he made that his narrative and commentary makes it truly explicit that he's saying, I hold. To understand virtue, we must acquaint ourselves with vice. Only then can we know the true measure of man. So, he's writing saying, and in distinct from biblical scripture, and Johannine concepts of fulfilling Old Testament content, he's calling it reprehensible where the Bible never admits it. And historical context is always a factor in, I'm told of, the Marquis's official reasons for detention at Charenton were true inhumane crimes, which I would consider reprehensible. But like I said, he went from a regal class of people who most likely his own neighbours, brethren at that level would have been able to just be too important to be called to liability. Whereas he came forward and expressed himself, and because he had at the Bible, he was there to pose questions like, principle, what's more dangerous, sitting at a French cafe, passing a book around in a circle, letting people take turns reading paragraphs of this admittedly obscene new genre of literature, or Napoleon Bonaparte marching out, because that's what always seems to happen with political leaders and war generals, is that they're going, babies suck pacifiers. We're pacifying the region of this foreign country. It doesn't seem to mean the same thing, but whatever. And crediting religion as the source of their virtue, and the Holy Bible without question as the book that's giving them all their wisdom and virtue. The Marquis scrutinises that in literature, in fiction, calls it disgusting, demonstrates varying styles of writing. The Crimes of Love is a series of, if you've read like Cluedo books, the Goosebumps, mystery novels, essentially. The Crimes of Love is brilliant. Justine, Philosophy in the Bedroom and Other Writings, 120 Days of Sodom and Juliet, those are the most well-known. The 1786 to 1788 dialogue between a priest and a dying man is about 5-6 pages in length, and it's a discussion between, you're not told how or why a particular man is dying, but he's dying, and priests are there to try and peg a Christian identity onto him and convert him, and he is able to just argue them out of there every point, and in such a parsimonious way and principled way that though so short, less than 10 pages in length, it could be arguably dwarf numbers of books on atheism that go on for 200 pages and more. So, yeah, as a writer, I love him, love the guy, and I think that we had Kate Winslet, Joaquin Phoenix, Michael Caine, Jeffrey Rush, Quills is. In the interviews, you hear Michael Caine talk, and he's first to say this is a very special story, and I think I know that Jeffrey Rush tends to be more credited for the is it Shine, the piano. I haven't seen it. Whatever that one is, I haven't seen, but I think it should. I'd award him. Credit him greatly for Quills. The character's played beautifully as well, I think. You sort of have him a bit cartoonish in a way in Pirates of the Caribbean, a bit kind of comical in Mystery Men, but I see a lot of passion and dedication to historical preservation going into Quills, and I think it's a brilliant production. Citing statements like the urge towards love, pushed to its limits, is an urge towards death, or in order to understand and better know virtue, we must acquaint ourselves with vice. Only then can we know the full measure of man. To have more, they've got more substance to them than, you know, and with what's said about his crimes, don't forget, well, please bear in mind that this is a century or so prior to the, you know, totalitarian statements like, I will be forever remembered as the person who gave birth to the 20th century, Jack the Ripper, thought to be Freemason. So this kind of regalty class echelon structure was going on, certainly in Desade's time. That's about 100 years prior to the time of the criminal life of Jack the Ripper. So it's hard to say. With his critics being truly with him starting a sexual liberation movement, the Libertines, and wanting to do that while being prepared to be detained in a ward, so he could publish and still manage to publish literature because he'd earned credibility and respect from society. It truly had to be his passion, and with his critic being Napoleon Bonaparte, the war general and political leader. This guy's killing foreigners. So whatever his actions, you would say were worse if done amongst his kindred, his community. So yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say if those who are upper class amongst him before he decided to step out as an artistic writer and say this means more to me than being a party to all of your, like, you know, buy and destroy a whore in a day, you know, sort of routine. Who's to say that he didn't have former brethren from high rollers back then who went, the Sards left, let's discredit him. And seems we've got support from Napoleon Bonaparte when it comes to that. So that seems to be a pattern throughout history, is to blame art that's more of a deformography to the impediments pitched up against freedom of thought and imagination, than, you know, launching cannonballs at native foreign villages. So I'd rather just read a obscene book. So I'm certainly not trying to acquit the Marquis de Sade post-mortem, like with the church dropping the heresy charges on Galileo and saying, okay, we might not be at the center of the universe as a planet. If he were guilty, confirmed. I can on three fronts I can tell you why he would have his character depicted. Three categorically plausible. We know he preceded the lifetime of Jack the Ripper, of the man known as Jack the Ripper, whose technique in killing was that known to someone qualified, a qualified surgeon, so a doctor, and would therefore have to have been a member of some sort of medical board. Yet to this day, it's thought a possible Freemason. We know this. So the Marquis de Sade, as I said, he steps out of an aristocratic group that he's already involved in 100 years before the birth and activities of Jack the Ripper. So just leaving that brotherhood would mean things like, if they were to commit group crimes or know of organised crimes as a group, they would have each other's backs and conceal for each other, and not be made accountable. So the one person to leave, much less leave to say I would rather write offensive fiction, that is one reason to go, well, then that brotherhood would be left with something to gain to have the Marquis represented as someone, de Sade represented as someone criminally insane. Because it doesn't fit with why he would want to be so gestural. Just as soon as there's a means, the printing press, for an upper-class nobleman to go, I want to write fiction that I want to start a sexual liberation movement and write fiction that insults the Bible. So the second reason would be to write in defense of the Holy Bible at that time in history. And then the third would be making an enemy of the political lead and military leader Napoleon Bonaparte, who's actually committing that. I believe military generals, war generals, are left with the dilemmas of going, well, what was the moral difference between killing all these foreigners and killing my next door neighbour? And that's where they do need to turn to, or often tend to turn to going, the magic of religion. It's so beautiful. So those three reasons. Stepping out of that aristocratic group would go, well, how insulting are you, Marquis, and how unpredictable. Like, what are you going to do next? Why would you leave us and risk psychiatric detention for the rest of your life in order to write obscene prose that gets publicly burnt, and be more interested in the distribution of your literature than profiting from it in terms of money? That isn't really fitting with the sort of mind that wants to end life, human life. So to this day, to this day, Jack the Ripper is only known as Jack the Ripper, but we can be probably certain that his first name was not Jack. Yeah. So anyway, I again can't be sure. What I will say is that if he was criminal, I'm too impressed by his art, not to excuse his crime, but to separate and then selectively appreciate one, whilst hold the other in contempt. But I'm just not convinced that the two I don't think it fits. It fits with like been gathered against. So I don't think it's right that they even think, especially when it's sealed, and that era in particular, seal with statements like art is a question mark, it should not be an answer. That's not an appeal to nihilism or anything goes, because there's, you would inquire before going out and speaking in a way that's gonna definitely misconstrue what you already know from well-established precedents have already been established. But in the content. But so we're looking at the world as an effect in terms of society, just taking the impact of Christian thinking, theology, theocracy, religious fundamentalism. And money was once all about eliminating the inconvenience of having to wheelbarrow gold bricks from one region of land to another. So they would, so bills would say the redeemable in gold, $50 redeemable in gold, $100 redeemable in gold. So gold coins, 30 pieces of silver were put up as the bribe for the abduction of the man Jesus of Nazareth, whom I don't have anything against. The Christ mythology I do in many respects. We end up with a world going, oh, and now we've got notes that are just backed by fucking nothing. They just are the notes. Or that a boost shares, someone shares in something that we haven't got any knowledge about. Or landowners who don't even have to really do anything to earn any money. Except, design ways to make people that are earning money suffer more, because they believe human sacrifice and Darwinian survival of the fittest go together like peas and carrots, which would be Gary Kanza and Roger Tor, ass fuckers central, ass fuckers capital. And so the view of Christianity as essentially a curse that people here have brought on themselves is largely how I've viewed the Antichrist. I've already discussed some of the histrionics, Nietzsche's initial contribution and writings, and taking what Christianity was initially representing as some sort of demonic or devil, when even by their own admittance, the devil was, well, he's drafted as a character who could converse with Christ. And even though that's in plagiarized Gospels, Christians don't believe them to be, but yet they still make the devil out to be more horrific than the devil is, even when talking to their Lord. So, unless they're more about it eating the loincloth and getting at the balls of their own Lord than they are the content about his character, that's one way for them to show that. Another point that's wise, and it's good reason to be reserved at the very least concerning how policing operates and their temperaments, is that, principle to practice goes, they're trying to say that a person being betrayed for a 30 silver piece of coin payout to hand a man over for execution is equivalent to him being an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-loving, all-present God incarnate, dying as a self-sacrificial volitional gesture for the benefit of all mankind. Makes no sense at all, even to them. So, while it causes all sorts of disasters, one of them that is definitely known is biphobia. And so, while they've been happy to say getting rid of the idea of a flat Earth for a view that the Earth is a globe is something that they're prepared to do, saying that Jesus of Nazareth was loving to all types of people and targeted for assassination and execution by known inbreeders who are incestuous for beliefs that they had about bloodline purity, or the psychosexual opposite again, from predator to prey. A kingdom full of families fucking family members, fellow family members, having babies with them, would zone in on, target and execute a non-kingdom member amongst conquered people, enslaved, but naturally born, non-inbred, bilateral brain. And that explains and accounts for why they would take such a fascinating interest in such character, include and exclude various gospels at their own discretion into the biblical canon or the Apocrypha. It's the single simplest way to explain what went on. But so now they go, well, we could stamp this with this is the most natural way to explain this, and then as a result bisexuals would have individual standing and rights. Or they go, let's start saying supernatural means things like Superman's cape or Super Mario or superannuation or fucking all these concepts of beyond. It's like, we have Beyond 2000, the TV show, talking about all this amazing technology, and it was whack at the time even, but what fulfilled it? The Y2K bug. It's like the second coming of Beyond 2000 wound up being the Y2K bug. And even then you had Christians going, fuck, our computer's gonna fuck us at midnight. You're like, fucking hell. Are you dumb or just plain stupid? And so, yeah. So, I don't consider that it's fair to say that grabbing someone out of a group of people you've conquered and executing them means you've caught a martyr. That comes up in the cover-up. They take false accusation, improper question, you're the king of the Jews, and then they make him out to be king of the world and God incarnate in the later books, so that it could not be said that a kingdom of inbreeders could ever be said to have made an error. And that's gradually petered out over the years. There was the Diana flag hoist delay of a few Christoseconds. They went up, hoist the flag. Nah, I find I don't care too much for what Islam is saying about there being no crucifixion and Christ being called some sort of prophet, but not the Messiah. That the Messiah is... what's his name again? Muhammad. And who marries a 6-year-old girl but doesn't take her to bed until she's 9 something. And they build a little shrine or side grave next to Muhammad for Jesus. And it's not very clever because it's still showing the same like Johannine concepts of Jesus' purpose in life being to die in order to consecrate the Genesis account, which is about, well, the question, who did Adam and Eve have kids with after they had 2 sons and one murdered the other, Cain and Abel? Then you're left with Adam, Eve and Cain. So you've either got a son impregnating his mother, or the father impregnating the mother. And either way, kids fucking one another in the same family of blood. So, though this was a known practice of kingdoms that thought bloodline purity, as you'll find throughout Scripture, there's no way. At the same time, in history, they thought if you had a wound and spat in it, it was curative and medicinal to spit in an open wound. So, and they didn't have pathology tests or labs. So, you go figure with an origin story that even has the first woman created out of a removed rib. You know, I tell police, they tell me these are their beliefs. I try and say politely, go fuck yourselves, go fuck yourselves. And, you know, and then they aggress more. Can you pick one or the other? Get rid of your Bibles or get fucking... It's the equivalent of saying hello to you in the most original and perfect way according to you. So, anyway. That'll do, Piggy. That'll do. Yeah, and anyone saying that they're bringing the religions all together, unifying them all, gets an instant bullshit medal. Because it's like what they try to say about drug use, been about just escapism, for instance. They're doing it, but with the core of their idealism. Because what will motivate them to escape will be the irreconcilability of aspects of one religion. So they jump ship to another one and go, well, let's put bits of this together. So they become like statisticians. And all they can put together, and Xerox and reflex, duplicate, are the shared attributes from that point of origins, which is just more kids fucking kids, now imaginable in varying colours. So, yeah. You falsify a religion. What they're always escaping is falsifiability. So they can sustain some claim to original perfection and claim that they've moved it forwards from a starting point that's perfect in some way, when it's actually sexually sickening to think it's sexually sickening to talk about now. Having left since age 16. So, fuck the church. And fuck today. I mean, I'm trying to, even as I'm trying to discuss this sort of shit, 3 police knocking on the door. I say, I know what you'll do. You'll take me to the watch house. You won't give me any of my life-saving medicine. You'll touch my balls. You'll touch my balls once you strip me down to pocketless boxer shorts. You'll be peds. Some of them are going to be already. There's a particular one who accosted me when I was at Dixon on the charge that that he thought I was self-convinced supervillain. And so I was thinking, oh, then you must be the hero. puts a knee up and he's going, why don't you obey my command? And I was thinking, well, you have your colon pointed right at the Dixon Church Children's Playground right as you do this, and I happen to know what your pat-down processes are like, so yeah, sexual sanity may be why I don't obey your command. But look, at least your sphincter can look at a garden while you can talk to me. That's talent, isn't it? Officer fucking talent. I think it should be in temporary legislation till they make a bisexual legally recognizable as a natural individual person. Then the cops that are fuck off on that account alone. If it's even mentioned in gossip, because that will be who they talk around, you know, and then try to say, oh, this art piece that you like. I've been astonished at the amount of people that I neither showed or that I did show and invited to engage in conversation with me, all said nothing nonetheless, and then said so much about me, and then go, oh, now let's lie, and then we'll punish him by saying, well, you deserve it because this video is all about lying. I'm like, well, A, your religion is a lie, and B, what if that particular bit of prose referred to being talked about so much that you don't even feel, in some sense, sincere within your own community? Did you consider that interpretation? No, go, no, fuck, sorry, whoops. Well, sorry, you already crossed the line. You crossed how many lines of privacy? Coin sloth. Is it loin cloth or coin sloth? The biblical etymology of the word Satan just meant opponent or adversary. And though anthropomorphized in the disputes, the verbal debates and challenges issued against Christ in the later and plagiarized Gospels, can really just be a concept for a conceptual way of saying, I oppose your point of view. So that's even on Christians' own biblical terms, and that's what the Church of Satan ended up saying of itself and says of itself, to my understanding, to this very day. So yeah, there's no real belief in either the existence of an anthropomorphic God or an anthropomorphized devil. There's homoeroticism between both for the Freemasons, which is the main reason Garricans and Roger Toll, given their definition of a homo, tend not to discuss for their Freemasonry, because they realize that they've once again plonked themselves into something of a condom tradiction. But I'll leave that between themselves. I'm not that butt cheeky. Rats on another account too. I'm aware the case is locked overseas. The onus here is not only for me to be travelled on behalf of Australia's marshalled efforts, in all fairness, but that I'm to be even media filmed, the entire travel session filmed, the flight or whatever means of travel marshalled by approved company, in addition to guards, Cairns, Toll, Holder, Cassandra Smith and Alany, fucking rats. They're fucking rats. Kent Clark, Lab, Inas Nidala. Fuck yourselves, you fucking god. Oh, the only thing immoral in this world. Try this. I rebuke and question onwards. that I am definitely against the ransom money put up for Jesus' capture, and I'm against the claim that he is a supernatural savior too. Try that, the only thing immortal in this world is money. Fucking inbreds. Now, if I see Alanie once more, I'll take her to court, and she's gonna say how fucking inbred she is to the judge. Would you like to buy a boy from, like, a mail order 10-year-old? Say 10, Alanie? And propose that you'll wait for them after telling them that God will speak through them, but they hear nothing but you trying to talk like Queen Elizabeth II? Now, why she may have questionable levels of wisdom that I can find to be respectable, you I find to be nothing but a fucking dyke. Abducted dyke. Abducted dyke, on the job. What can I expect next? Go online looking for a fucking, mail order boy. A Moroccan boy that's tired of Freemasons sniffing cocaine out of their butt cracks, and then tell him that you'll wait till to marry him. I'll wait for you. I'll wait for you. After you commit him completely to fundamentalist, biblical literalist Christianity. Rats, cunty Christians, lab, and us nidala. His Murdoch guy with the Freemasons went in Australia and Illuminati went in the US, and back and forth, I want to know if there's anything decent about him. That's a bit of a question, but there's not much time. You see, what we know historically, and will always know, is that they got away from calling schizophrenia multiple personalities, because what that led to was, well, then you have multiple surveillance agencies converging on the one person with various agendas. And so that became very outrageous. People said, what's a personality anyway? Like, how do you define one? How do you constrain one? Blah, 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 blah. And so now if they go, well, fuck, yeah, we better get rid of saying multiple personalities and just try and say other things like psychosis. But what that's now proven is that that's even massive. It's confirmed everyone's former thoughts about multiple surveillance agencies converging on the one person with varying agendas. And if they reintroduce it, they're going to confirm it even more. So that is fucking interesting. They'll use religion too, of course. That's always a fallback. Examples of religion factoring in is that how you can go, well, suppose a certain amount of pain drives you to a particular mood. Now, you go back to this school playground, someone gets bashed on the playground, there's moods. To go and think you can then divvy off and section off pain not being managed correctly as proof of a mental illness is to go, I'm religious inbred, I'm religious inbred. I swear to the gods of the religious inbreds. Jesus' murder makes my pussy moist. Okay, I have to, excuse me, my mood. Nidala, Chief Pharmacist. Are you male? If so, I would like you in a joint suit on abduction and hostaging concerning you with a man named Michael Zarbo. You'll find him married to my mother at this point. In Nidala, Chief Pharmacist, Australian Capital Territory. If you're female, I'll give you one more chance to tell my doctor to up my pain drugs. If I have to enter legal contests, I have to travel for those contests, and while I was working, I was on about 3 times the fucking drugs that I am on now, in terms of opiate potency and benzodiazepine access. So this is getting made to crawl. Do you understand that? Now, the rebates on those sorts of drugs didn't mean much to my boss at the time. Things like Epilum and risperidone and all of those other drugs, their rebates, if I cancelled if a doctor cancelled the supply to the patient via a chart, I've been over this before, you've heard of this before, blah, 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 then I could, 2 patients having the same drug cancelled, make a 3rd box, redispense it without the pharmacy purchasing it from the wholesaler, and then the pharmacy gets paid the rebate value of a drug they never bought. Now that only really, it seemed only worthwhile in my boss's mind to concern this little practice to the high rebate drugs. Why do it for something that's gonna get you back $2 when you could make a new risperidone box and get how many $100 or whatever it is. Anyway, so that left the cheaper drugs closer to nature's own, free for me, if not the pharmaceutical waste bin, depending how I felt at the time. And if that's why am I even talking about it? Surveillance agencies. It's already my known state of appropriate health. So, may it please your court. You are liable to soon be issued with attempted murder charges on the grounds that I have not been adequately medicated. By intention, as it's obviously not by accident that my scripts have been prescribed, so it must be an intention. If the intention is to kill me, then you'll continue, I guess my regime will continue or get worse. So let's see what's next. That's $90. Bye-bye. Speak up. Say something for yourselves now. Gary Cairns, Roger Toll, Peter Holder. Your abduction bourgeois side, what do you do about this nasal cyst caused while in your service without disclosure in documentation of workers' rights? Right nasal sinus mucosa retention cyst, what do you do? Then rats. You fucking rats. Rat fuck. Rats. Rats Klein Calvin. Lab. En as in Dala, Gary Cans, Roger Toll, Peter Holder. Wow, today I just celebrating my graduation from Police Academy because I've always wanted to send a message, and I think policing is especially about sending a message. And though I won't say that message is the morality of the Christian scriptures, what I will say is that I do like to show kiddies in school. Well, guess where I'm going to be trying to touching you up once you're a little bit older. And that's why we go to schools and we fist koala puppets. And as soon I thought back to when I was a young lad, and I thought it was just amazing to watch when the policeman visited the classroom and the officer was fisting the koala. I grew a bit older. I went to a XXX show that had anal fisting footage, and I thought, wow, I'm not even being that harsh. And then I thought, well, so at least I can send that message to young people that, well, when you get a bit older, you can expect a bit of a touch about it. And that's why I decided to join the force. Congratulations to me. I mean, there's always been those Where's Wally books, so the kids need to see, from these koala puppets when they get fisted very heavily, so that they, we can make them think, well, guess which body parts this koala puppet doesn't have that you have, because that's straight where we're going to be touching you. Loincloth to meet and greet you, it's basic protocol, and we just like to, so we start with the juniors by showing how we fist koala puppets, and then we proceed from there to the genitalia. And that's why graduating today means. From Ziggy Stardust, Bow Song, 5 years, I loved the first time I would watch the clip. I found it to be eye-piercing, and I would think about, it was like, on your feet, man. Like, by then I had noticed enough, observational elements of history repeating itself in regards to dynamics in the company mother would keep, pitfalls and perils and betrayals and my own, been held in states of non-disclosure, but negative suspense. That's not going to have any, and it's 5 years, that's all we've got. But then I would think too about religion being really in conjunction with the mind opening itself to learning, and that's when preschool, by the time you reach age 5, you're young enough to be a kindergarten student. But what I think about this born again concept and how I talk about this, if there was a double-edged sword, it's Christianity's double-ended bind, or double-ended inexplicit or inexplicated wedge at either end. The concealment of a kingdom's dispatched false accuser, resulting in, to say that Jesus' death was a murder-suicide is like, while it strips it of these supernatural overtones, it's actually whatever the word would be for it is horribly more barbaric, containing sex offences, violence offences, being left pegged as a token of mockery in front of everyone while suffering. Struggling to breathe, the diaphragm, having to push weight against the nails, penetrating both, piercing through both of your legs crossed over at the ankles in order to push the chest up enough to continue drawing breath. So it's why I'm still able to have these phases where I appreciate some Christian artist, Joseph Clay. But it's when they get into the real theological prose that I detach. So I like their lines like, "He didn't die for nothing." I just don't say that he died for me or you, and you won't know what having respect for the dead or dying is, and I don't think really, and so long as you're making Arnott's Scotch finger biscuits out of covering up for the essentially the equivalent of a police dispatch going, "Are you boogie? Are you nigger G banger number one?" It's while enslavement is against, while enslavement against Negroes is celebrated at the highest level of government, you don't ask people that you've already enslaved to answer to the charge of bearing the highest possible achievable ranks of a kingdom that has already excluded them from being a part of, by definition. So the double-edged sword is that cover-up of that. You're not actually defending Jesus' principle from the unjust death. You're defending the guy that asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" by calling Jesus the king of the Jews later because you fear an inbred kingdom. So they're even using titles like born again in Christology, born again Christian. But what I think when this cover up it's like one edge, all four of these gospels, even when the chronology is corrected, but it ties back into justifying Genesis, the book of Genesis, and going, well, so all this happened and he gave his life of his own volition so that you can be, don't feel bad about, well, you never felt bad about incest. That was perfect. You can impregnate your rib. You can do a lot of things with that. I mean, that's versatile. Are you sick of jacking off in a garden and before the Lord Almighty, because he's male too? Be careful, because he's the only one that can call you a homo erectus in such. But then why not remove a rib? They'll use terms like boner in the future, but for now we'll make a biatch for you out of that absent rib, and she'll be treated absent-minded for centuries and centuries to follow. Even pregnancy was likened to, the male was likened to a farmer scattering seeds into dirt. The woman was not credited to have contributed to the biology of the offspring in any way. She was just an incubator, and that's the other edge of the double-edged sword. Yet apples. If should she eat an apple? I suppose what eating that apple might antagonize him about, or pomegranate, is on its way down her digestive tract. It bypassed, and perhaps upon discussion, the disclosure of the insanity to the base claim that all womankind originated from a rib in the first place. So, what's guarding her digestive tract, if not for her own rib cage? But anyway, so you get that in incest was either ideologically cheered as the only way to keep blood pure, or ideologically upheld and practiced as the only way to keep a bloodline, a family bloodline pure. And that's why Christianity is so I see it as being like I would destroy my 5-year loopology if I could. And fuck knows I have a backlog of counter convergence, attrition types, typologies and types against me trying to marshal myself to endurance, if not recovery. But what I see Christianity sort of doing is, it's like you're wanting to ask for that curse, even if you should be, blessed to enjoy the libertinage from it. Because it's a two wrongs. It's the epitome of two wrongs. How two wrongs don't make a right. It's the ultimate example. So I'm convinced that the only thing to overturn statements like don't believe in history because history repeats itself is really demonstrable by applying our falsifiability efforts at it to ourselves where it applies to ourselves, that we can evolve further. So, Roger Mark insisted on raising the issue. Freemason to Illuminati converge ad hostem. Do you reckon if you put the Arabs under this some enslavement act, that's the best place to base studies in Murdoch? What? Because there's only one way to call Islamist conquerors when their story gets called nice by the other theologians on the basis of a non-crucified but graveside Jesus to the crediting of inbred peds from Genesis. Start from bottoms up. My plumbing's blocked. It's all full of shit, really. And people don't get rights, they can only talk about wrongs, huh? What I think can be said is that if this problem is tremendously global, then the deepest answers are in the hands of the religious, and they don't have to necessarily be religions that are being peddled in courts or to police, but religions nonetheless. Religions that view the courts and cops as like their commoners, in the sense that the metaphysics of their faith has the strategic effect of operating and organizing these ground level forces. This can mean a lot of problems, and as rights evolve, what progresses constantly is the question of a natural person is defined by what, and we have so many different types of people, all of whom are by all religions. And this means that, while some of the smartest scientists have throughout history credited religion, for their... Isaac Newton, it's hard to say whether he was more into getting away from a plague outbreak going on at the time, that then spurred his attention, and that he understood. Religions that manipulate other religions and get that has tip to and respect from the powers that be, without disclosure of what their religions are about, in a way get away with a lot of non-disclosure. So when you look at essentially those who would be in design of chemicals, for example, for big pharma, all the best tech that they've got, it doesn't really matter, because by their religion they are not going to. By their religion, they're clinging to survival of the fittest that always wins, and a social Darwinist attitude that isn't even viewed as the unifying or base principle of evolution anymore, but comes from a time when the genome was not even to have been studied, and a gene or genetics were not to have been known how to be studied by technology. That's when survival of the fittest came about as a campaign slogan. So, it's a bit like saying if you hate recreational drugs, like Bill Hicks saying, if you hate recreational drugs, go and throw out all your favorite albums, because the people who made those albums are pretty fucking high on drugs. It's like it's the same as saying to big pharma now, if your religion congregates over being pro-human sacrifice because of survival of the fittest arguably amounts to the same principle, then throw out your evolutionary textbooks and your technology as well. Because all life coming from a single source, which we've gathered was not a pair of tits and a uterus coming out of a removed rib, despite our many applications of the word boner. That's survival of the ribless, essentially. That's just from what I know about homo recruitment in the Capital Chemist Group at the ACT in Canberra by the co-founders. As you can see, I'm co-founder viddying one right here and the other one right here, and they're a pair of faggots. But I digest from my point. Oh, of course, I have one missing rib. Fuck. No, the biotech for chemicals by their religion will actually won't be designed to benefit anyone that they think is unnaturally an unnatural byproduct of evolution somehow, and to be deemed weak in a sense that they choose as well. A week is, 7 days? Big farmers lobbying against Christopher Reeve and the person that took acid and jumped off a building thinking he could fly. Well, this is going to come out of your health insurance, Mr. Reeve. Mr. Reeves. So that's a drug that Big Pharma are campaigning against in official terms, making and distributing, depending on which pharmacist, in terms of other markets, and they'll do that and try and fuck up an artist's life as well. So you're going to have all types of people, all types of sexual health preferences, recognized as meriting to have chemicals designed to the benefit of their health. And you're going to have to do it with people who do studies, doing them in such a way with tech that is not going to be harmful at all to all of the demographics aforementioned. And you're going to have them wanting to abolish what's deoxyribonucleic acid? Oh, we don't know. Maybe we'll ask the survival of the fittest, or we'll ask the bitch that comes from his rib. Let's ask the Freemason Church. They might know where the rib is. Hey, Freemasons, do you have the magic rib? Freemasons, you got the magic rib? We want to ask if it's fittest for our survival. Because we don't think DNA really exists. Freemasons. Yes, so all life ultimately deriving from a common ancestry. And the earth, that being the earth. Swamp Thing. You're otherwise going to have that, because how do we know that in Australia we haven't got Freemasons enslaving Arabs who they know to have good scientific minds when applied, and enslaving them to make better tech, and say you're not getting out of here till you've made us such and such technology. That's another thing we can't be sure of. But one thing we can be sure of is they can't kick around survival of the fittest as the fucking campaign slogan for evolution, nor for the best moral way to operate a society, unless they abolish the existence of the DNA of DNA and genetics altogether. And there goes all their psychiatry and everything. Then and there. Anything they say about psychiatry, everything, all of it's gone. Anyway, I gotta go finger my rib hole. It's It helps when I go near Capital Chemist and sit down if I finger my rib hole, because it's a bit relieving from the thought of pedestals, I think they're called. I ask my toilet. It's full of, well, it's the bogs. Don't go near my toilet. But good night, all. Testing, Muzz. It's an hour off. Rem rough me. I think with all this talk about it being ad infinitum, well, it has to be a fallacy ultimately. But who insures the insurers? Who, if you've got bunkers and then their security is insured. Lawyers, various parties, all of whom are relying on tech. You've essentially got, as I spoke about many months ago, like a kingdom that's upside down in terms of the throne room. So, they wouldn't have something to do with, Gary Cairns and Roger Toll, they wouldn't have where they're secure. Any interest really in going div various people's homes. They'd have something called pedovid, and it would be Gary Cairns to one of Roger's fucking informal kids, and Roger to Gary's, and yeah, they'd, you know, they may still call it pedovid-19 because it might give them kicks. Might give them kicks to make the 19 represent age in the event that they're tracked. But yeah, that's the dilemma that I see, is that if the tech operators are undisclosed, ultimately, all parties that have tech that's insured has got to be insured by tech that's better tech than the tech that they're using. How do you get around that? How do you falsify that? There's the side issue of members at a particular party having people within the same in the same group aware of the tech that they're using and aware of any and all maintenance and repair typography, and as well as knowing how and why there can't be any exploits, despite what such a group would know. And yeah. These two Freemason peds, obviously I'm never gonna be able to regain trust for them. They can do damage, and it's irrelevant to what they'll say about compensation and private health insurance gestured as of such and such time, blah blah blah. Mandated such and such time. It's irrelevant. It's ultimately irrelevant. Because Roger Toll especially loves his kids. So I actually think now he's into making sure that he originally knows more than he is disclosing in his original claims, so that he can come around later seeming like the resolver of problems. I consider him tremendously dangerous person. And yeah. So that's all I'll say for now. I'm just looking at my own reflection. Because you know that never happens in units such as these. Yeah, it's enough of rip. Go to your computers. There's bomb for the weather.